Hey guys, okay, so we're gonna be doing an assembly of this Mikuni carb today. This is out of a Safari 377, I believe it's a 1987 model. So I figured I'd just show you the assembly. There's no point showing you the disassembly, just because, I mean, if you can do this, you can obviously take it apart. The only thing I won't be showing you, or maybe I will, I'm not sure, but the part that screws onto the top here, which like the cover, the spring, the needle, all that stays in the snowmobile usually, just because you just unscrew it and it's still hooked to the throttle cable. This will be from that part down. I'll go through what each of these parts is. Obviously, how to set it. There's only a couple things you have to set, and yeah, so hopefully this helps some people out. So if you're wondering what carb this is the VM34-309 or 34-363. These are the two model numbers for them. So all I did to this was take it apart. I cleaned everything with carb cleaner, used little wires to clean out, small orifices. Anywhere there's a hole, just use a wire, run a wire through. A lot of times I even use like a wire brush because you could put like one or two or three of the little wires in a hole and scrub it out. So if, like, for example, there's one bent over, you could just put it in there, clean it out like that. So that's a nice way of doing it. Or just like pieces of copper wire work well too. So let's get started. Okay, so we're at the bottom of the carburetor here. This pin here, just to get that out of the way, just use a little punch and just gently tap it out. You don't need to pull it all the way out, you just need to get it out to about there. And we'll start assembling our needle assembly. Oh, I should point out, one of the telltale signs that this is the model number I described is that model number, is this little plate right here. This is your baffle plate, and it has a unique shape like this right here. So it's got this sort of cutout and this key, whatever you want to call it. This is the telltale sign that that's the model of carburetor that you have. The other ones, the ones that are close to this, it'll either be sort of closed off here or more square, if that makes sense. So this is the unique part of this carburetor, along with a couple other small things, but that's the biggest telltale sign. So basically what we're gonna do is we're gonna get that baffle plate. It sits in the carburetor in this orientation here. So basically we are going to grab one of these little O-rings that came with it. They're sort of like a paper type O-ring. We're gonna place that right there. And then this goes in here. And we'll let it sit there. And then we're gonna grab this part right here. This is basically your needle valve body, you could call it. The needle valve goes in here and seats on the little hole inside there. So we're going to put the paper washer on there, and then we're going to screw it going through the baffle and through the other washer. We're going to use a, what is this, 9mm socket just to help us out. And we're just gonna tighten it down till everything's aligned nicely there. Not super tight, it just has to be, held there. Okay, that should do it. Oh, and if you're wondering, I just put a tiny bit of just light oil on all these parts just so they screw in nice. That's the only reason. If you're seeing oil here, that's what that is. Okay, so with that done, we can assemble the needle valve assembly. So we're going to grab this part right here. And this is basically your float arm. And if you want to know which way it goes in, one of the best ways to tell is you'll see there's a little indent right there from where the needle would have been wearing when you took it apart. So that obviously goes downward. And also this crease where the hinge comes around, it goes downward. And when I say downward, I mean in this direction here. This is your actual needle. It does not have a rubber end, it's got a metal end. So we're going to drop it into this hole. And then we're going to use this clip here, little fine wire clip. It basically slides over the needle valve housing, like, doesn't matter what position it's in basically, but Hopefully you can see that. It just goes around, the big part goes around the brass part of the needle valve body, and then the little part stays up top, and it basically just keeps the needle valve from falling out. Okay, and then you can put your little float lever in. And then all I'm doing is pushing this through, and then I can just probably use my needle nose pliers to just get that in. That's good there. And basically you just want it to be flush with the outside of this post. Okay, so everything can move freely there, which is nice. Okay guys, one thing to note about the float valve assembly here is there's a spec for when you're holding the carburetor like this, there's a spec for what the distance is from this flange to this point right here. Right here. So from here, from this flat surface to this flat surface, there's a spec for that. But basically all you need to do is make sure this is parallel to your plate right here, or your baffle. Basically, if that's the case, you're fine. This isn't a super precise carburetor, so that's basically where you want it. When you're holding it like this, you want this sitting parallel to this plate. Okay. So next thing we will assemble, I guess, here is our main jet. So part of the main jet is obviously the jet itself, and you'll want to make sure this little hole here is nice and cleaned out. This thing here, I believe this is a what's it called? It's a baffle ring, I think. It sits on here like this. So just like that. This little needle screws into it. Or jet, I should say. This little jet screws into it. And that is a 6mm. Again, not super tight. Just enough to hold it in there. Good. Okay, next thing will be this piece here. It's our pilot jet. It's got the holes in the bottom, 8 holes, 9 holes. Goes into this right here, and you just use a flathead screwdriver to screw it down. There's no setting, it just gets screwed in there and tightened down. So not crazy tight, just enough to hold it in there. Okay, so I guess we'll move on to our idle screw, which is this big screw here with the spring. Goes into the side. And basically what this does is you'll see as I screw it in here, you'll see it start to poke out the side there. And basically when your throttle slide comes down, the throttle slide can rest on this little point right here. So I don't know what you screw it down to, but I just checked it on my way out. And basically, I screwed it all the way down, and then I unscrewed it 3.5 turns. That's what it was set to before, so that's what we'll set it to now. So let's make the flathead here. So we'll go half, 1, half 2, half 3.5. That's where it was before. And then basically this is just to adjust your idle. Once the engine's warm, you can just go in there with your hand and turn that to get the idle that you like. Last piece here is your air screw. So it's this piece here with a spring, and it goes right here. So this one, there is a spec on it to start. So you screw it all the way down till it bottoms out. Now you don't go super tight, just till you feel it. Okay, so there it's bottomed out, and then 1.5 turns out. So 1/2. Okay, so that's good. That's pretty much it for the carb. This right here is your where your primer, the line from your primer goes on. So if that was unscrewed, basically you just use a flathead screwdriver, you can screw that back in. These are overflows right here, so they are directly connected to this hole and this hole. And basically you just run a piece of, I think it's 3/16 line up and around through this slot here. I'll show you it when I put it in the machine. up and around and just down, and then up and around and just down. And that's what these little tabs are for, which I'll show you that in a second. It's just if the machine's moving around, this fuel can spill out that way. Okay, so I guess we can put our bowl back on. So the bowl just has an O-ring at the bottom here, or the bowl drain has an O-ring at the bottom. So we'll just screw that on, and we'll tighten that down. I don't have my big wrench, but anyway, you just tighten that down. And then we're gonna put our floats in. So these are your floats, so they just slide right here, like that. And basically those little pins that stick out push right here, and they let the fuel in or not into your carburetor to keep the float or keep the fuel level at the right height. Okay, so we're just gonna put that together. That. Sure, everything's good. Oh, there was a gasket there. Hopefully you guys noticed that. Okay, so with the carburetor like this, the two just screws go at the back here. And the screws with the tab go at the front. I guess it would actually be the back of the carb sitting in the machine. So yeah, we'll just make sure they're sticking out like that. Okay, so I got a couple pieces of fuel line here. This isn't the exact size. This is, I think, only 1/8. But I cut them. Let's see what they are here. If you're looking for how much you need, they're just under 8, so 7 5/8 each, and they're just going to be for this overflow. So I'm just going to push that on. It's a little tight, but it's just for an overflow. So it goes through here. That, and then this one goes on here. Over there. Like that. If they're a little bit bigger, they'd sit in there a little nicer, but that's good for now. Okay, and then the last thing is your boot here. Basically goes between the carburetor and the engine. So it's got a little notch. This is part 07100-10. You can see it's got a little notch right here and a flat spot here. That little notch goes up against that notch. And I'm going to use my old gear clamp. That. And I'll actually put it like this because it's easier to get to when you're in the machine. Okay, I'm not going to tighten it down just so I have a little bit more room to play in the machine. But that's it, guys. That's the assembly of this carburetor. You can basically just plug it right into your engine. Airbox outlet goes onto here. This is your other clamp. You would clamp it down, put your throttle slide in, fill it up with gas, and you should be good to go. So hopefully that helped anyone out who has this similar carburetor.